Welcome to this deep dive. We're
Mm.
going to be exploring this really cutting-edge frontier microbiome-based therapeutics.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it's fascinating. We're going to be using two different sources to sort of unpack this. We have a scientific review article called Microbiome-Based Therapeutics, and that's by Matthew T. Sorbra and Eric G. Paymer. Then we have this really interesting essay called Microbiome Modulation, From Early Discoveries to Emerging Therapies.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're going to cover a lot of ground.
We are. We're going to uncover how scientists are actually taking what they're learning about the microbiome and using it to treat and prevent disease.
So where should we start?
Well, I think the first thing we got to do is establish like a foundation. What exactly is the microbiome and why should people care about it?
Right. So the microbiome refers to like all those trillions of microorganisms that live in and on the human body.
Trillions. That's a lot.
Yeah. It is. And that includes bacteria, fungi, viruses. All these little guys form these intricate ecosystems, and the gut actually harbors the most diverse and abundant population.
So it's not just about digestion then?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
These microbes are impacting our overall health in ways we're only just beginning to understand. They affect digestion, nutrient absorption, immune function, even mental well-being.
Wow. So what happens when this balance in the microbiome gets disrupted?
Well, when the composition and function of the microbiome are thrown off balance, a state we call dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis.
Yeah, it can actually contribute to a whole bunch of health problems. Both the review and the essay actually highlight how dysbiosis is linked to inflammatory bowel disease, metabolic disorders like diabetes, even mental health conditions like depression.
Wow. So these tiny organisms can have a really significant impact on our well-being.
They really can.
It's pretty remarkable. So let's dive into how scientists are trying to manipulate the microbiome for therapeutic purposes.
Okay. One approach that's been getting a lot of attention is fecal microbiota transplantation. We call it FMT for short.
FMT. So what is that exactly?
Well, it involves taking a fecal sample from a healthy donor and transferring it to a recipient.
Okay, it sounds a little radical, but it's proving to be very effective.
It is. It's been a game changer for treating recurrent Clostridioides difficile colitis.
Difficile.
Yeah, it's an infection that can be really hard to treat with the usual antibiotics. The review article actually says FMT has about a 90% success rate in treating it.
90%? That's incredible.
It is. It really shows you the potential of this approach. Essentially, FMT works by restoring something we call colonization resistance.
Colonization resistance.
Basically, it's the ability of a healthy microbiota to prevent harmful pathogens from growing.
So it's like replenishing the gut with good bacteria to fight off the bad guys.
Exactly. It's like giving your gut a microbial makeover. But FMT's effectiveness does seem to vary for other conditions.
So it's not a cure-all.
Right. Research on using FMT for things like inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, and graft versus host disease, GVHD, is still pretty new, and the results haven't been as consistent.
I guess that makes sense. Every condition is going to be different and complex.
You got it. The microbiome plays a lot of roles in the body.
So what are some other ways scientists are trying to manipulate the microbiome without doing something as drastic as an FMT?
Well, both of our sources really emphasize the role of diet. It plays a huge part in shaping the composition and function of the gut microbiota.
So we really are what we eat, or at least our gut microbes are.
You could say that. Diets that are rich in soluble fiber, like those found in fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
So eating a healthy, balanced diet isn't just good for us, it's good for our little microscopic friends, too.
Exactly. And then there are prebiotics.
Prebiotics, what are those?
Prebiotics are a type of dietary fiber that humans can't digest, but our gut bacteria can.
Okay.
They basically act as food for beneficial bacteria. They stimulate their growth and activity.
So it's like a specialized meal plan for our gut microbes.
That's a good way to put it. Things like inulin, fructooligosaccharides, FOS, and galactoligosaccharides, GOS, are some common ones. You can find them naturally in foods like onions, garlic, bananas, and legumes.
So incorporating those foods into our diet can help us cultivate a thriving gut microbiome. What happens when the bacteria break down these prebiotics?
Well, that leads us to postbiotics.
Postbiotics.
Yeah, postbiotics are the beneficial compounds that are produced when those gut bacteria ferment the dietary fiber.
So they're like the byproducts of the bacteria eating prebiotics. And these byproducts actually benefit us.
Precisely. And a prime example of this is short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
SCFAs. Okay. Like what?
Like butyrate, acetate, and propionate. These are all produced by gut bacteria when they ferment that dietary fiber. And they actually play a really crucial role in maintaining the integrity of the gut lining.
Wow, so these tiny organisms can have a ripple effect on our well-being.
Definitely. And they also help reduce inflammation and even influence how our brains function.
So maybe adding beneficial bacteria directly to the gut could be a good strategy too. What about probiotics? What role do they play?
Probiotics are live microorganisms, usually bacteria, that we eat to introduce good strains into the gut.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of those.
Yeah. They're found naturally in fermented foods like yogurt and sauerkraut.
Oh, okay.
And they're also available as supplements. Some popular strains, like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, can actually help improve digestion, support the immune system, and just generally boost gut health.
But I feel like I've heard that not all probiotics are created equal.
That's true. The effectiveness of a probiotic really depends on the specific strain of bacteria and what you're using it for.
So it's not just about taking any random probiotic. It's about being specific and targeted.
Exactly.
So besides prebiotics, probiotics, and even FMT, what are some of the ways scientists are working with the microbiome?
Well, scientists are starting to explore something called symbiotic microbial consortia.
Symbiotic microbial consortia. That sounds complicated. What is that?
It basically involves selecting and assembling a group of beneficial bacterial strains into a consortium. It's like creating a microbial dream team.
So instead of just introducing one type of bacteria, we're putting together a whole team of good microbes. That makes sense?
Yeah, it's about creating a more targeted and synergistic approach. Researchers are looking into how to use these consortia to treat things like C. difficile infection
Oh, wow.
and vancomycin-resistant Enterococcus faecium colonization.
Wow. And they're even trying to use them to modulate the immune system and make cancer immunotherapy more effective. Those are some ambitious targets. What are some of the challenges with developing these consortia?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is just understanding how different bacterial strains interact.
So it's not just about throwing a bunch of good bacteria together and hoping for the best.
Nope. They need to be compatible. They have to coexist and work together.
It's like putting together a complex puzzle where every piece has to fit just right.
That's a good way to put it. And then you've got the challenge of figuring out how to produce these consortia on a large scale and make sure they're stable and stay alive.
That's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
What about engineering bacteria? Is that something scientists are doing?
They are. It's pretty cutting edge. Scientists are now able to genetically modify certain bacteria to enhance or introduce new functions.
It's like giving those bacteria a custom upgrade to do specific jobs.
Exactly. For example, the review article talked about how researchers engineered a common gut bacteria called bacteroids, the Tioter omicron.
What did they make it do?
They engineered it to promote mucus release in the gut, and it actually protected mice from getting colitis.
Wow. That shows just how much potential there is for using these engineered bacteria to directly impact gut health. But there must be some safety concerns about making changes to bacteria at that level.
Of course. There are definite challenges and ethical things to consider with this approach. One big hurdle is that we can't manipulate every species of the microbiota. The tools for genetic engineering are getting better, but we're not there yet. And there's always the risk that these genetically modified bacteria could have unintended consequences or mess up the balance of the microbial ecosystem.
It's a balancing act between innovation and safety, as always. What about using the molecules that these microbes produce? Are there therapeutic applications for those?
Definitely. This approach focuses on isolating and delivering specific beneficial compounds that gut bacteria make.
So we're basically extracting the good stuff from the microbial world.
Right. It's a way to have more control over the therapeutic effects, and it's potentially safer, especially for people with weakened immune systems.
What are some of the compounds that are being investigated?
Well, the review article mentions short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, as a prime example.
You talked about those earlier, right?
Yeah, those are things like butyrate, acetate, and propionate. They have a ton of benefits, supporting gut health, reducing inflammation, even influencing brain function.
So these compounds, which are just byproducts of our gut bacteria doing their thing, are actually super beneficial for us.
That's right. And scientists are now looking at ways to deliver these SCFAs directly as therapies or encourage their production in the gut through diet or other microbiome manipulation strategies.
It's amazing how our understanding of the microbiome is opening up new doors for treatment and prevention. But what are some of the roadblocks in the way of actually translating these discoveries into real-world therapies?
Well, one big challenge is just how unique everyone's microbiome is. Each person's gut microbiota is shaped by a whole combination of things: genetics, diet, lifestyle, environmental factors. That makes it really difficult to develop one-size-fits-all treatments.
So a personalized approach is key.
Absolutely. It's essential to tailor treatments to each person's specific needs.
But personalized therapies are probably a lot more complex and expensive to develop, right?
You got it. That's definitely one of the big reasons why developing microbiome-based therapies is so challenging. And the complexity of the microbiome itself is another major hurdle.
We're talking about a vast and dynamic ecosystem here, not just individual microbes.
Precisely. Understanding how all of these microbial communities interact with each other and with their host is essential for developing safe and effective treatments.
And it's not just about identifying the key players. It's about figuring out how they all work together, their communication networks, the ecological principles at play, and all of this is happening at a microscopic level.
Exactly. It's incredibly intricate. And that complexity also means that we need more long-term studies to figure out how durable these treatments are and if there are any potential risks to manipulating the microbiome. We don't want to create quick fixes that end up causing problems down the line.
Right. We need to be thinking about safe and sustainable therapies that promote long-term health. What about the regulatory side of things? Are there any challenges there?
Definitely. When you're talking about introducing live bacteria or microbial products into the human body, there are a lot of safety concerns. Regulatory agencies like the FDA here in the US and the European Medicines Agency have really strict guidelines for developing and improving these types of therapies.
So companies working on microbiome-based therapies have to jump through a lot of hoops to prove that their products are safe and effective.
Absolutely. And it's not a quick or cheap process. It often involves extensive preclinical testing, clinical trials, and ongoing monitoring to make sure the therapies are both safe and effective in the short and long term.
It's a delicate balance between fostering innovation and making sure patients are safe.
You got it. And it's an evolving landscape. As our understanding of the microbiome continues to grow, these regulations will likely have to adapt too.
That makes sense. So it's a challenging field, but one with huge potential.
Exactly. The commercial viability of microbiome-based therapies is another big challenge. Personalized therapies especially are a lot more complex and expensive to develop and manufacture than mass-produced drugs.
So we need to find a way to balance the promise of personalized medicine with the economic realities of actually getting these treatments to the people who need them.
You got it. It's a complex equation. But researchers, clinicians, and policymakers are all working on finding solutions.
That's encouraging to hear. Even though there are a lot of challenges, the potential benefits of harnessing the power of the microbiome are immense. It could revolutionize how we treat and prevent disease.
I couldn't agree more. So even though we're facing all these challenges, there's still a lot of excitement about the future of microbiome-based therapeutics.
Yeah, it really feels like we're on the cusp of something big.
Definitely. And as we learn more about this complex ecosystem, we're going to see even more innovative treatments emerge.
I'm excited to see what's next. Where do you see the most potential for real-world applications of these therapies?
Well, one area that's already showing amazing results is fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT, for treating recurrent Clostridioides difficile infection.
Oh yeah, we talked about that earlier. What makes it so effective for that particular condition?
C. Difficile infection often happens after someone's been on antibiotics,
Right.
and the antibiotics disrupt the natural balance of their gut microbiota.
All right.
And that disruption basically creates a perfect opportunity for C. difficile to take over.
Makes sense.
And that causes severe diarrhea and inflammation. FMT works by basically reintroducing a diverse and healthy community of microbes from a donor.
So it's like restoring that balance.
Exactly. It's like replanting a garden with a bunch of different beneficial plants to outcompete the weeds,
Right, right.
And the review article actually mentions that FMT has something like a 90% success rate in treating recurrent C. difficile colitis.
90%, that's huge. Way higher than traditional antibiotic treatments.
It is a game changer for patients who haven't had any luck with conventional therapies. And the best part is the field is constantly evolving.
Not really.
Yeah, there are actually companies out there developing standardized FMT products.
So making it safer and more accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. Are there other conditions where FMT is showing promise?
Researchers are looking into its potential for a bunch of different things, like inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and even metabolic disorders like obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
The results are still pretty early, but there's growing evidence that FMT could have a much wider impact than we initially thought.
It's amazing to think that just transferring gut bacteria from one person to another could have such a big impact on so many different aspects of health.
I know, it's pretty remarkable. What about less invasive approaches, though?
Yeah, like what?
Well, the essay on microbiome modulation talked a lot about using dietary strategies to shape the gut microbiota.
Right. So we can actually influence our gut microbiome by what we eat.
Absolutely, diet is so important.
What are some of the dietary strategies that are being looked at?
One promising approach is to just increase your intake of prebiotics, those indigestible fibers that feed the good bacteria.
Oh, right.
Studies have shown that prebiotics can improve bowel regularity, boost immune function, and even lower the risk of certain chronic diseases. So eating more prebiotic-rich foods like onions, garlic, bananas, legumes, whole grains could be a simple but really effective way to improve gut health.
Exactly. It's all about giving those beneficial bacteria what they need to thrive.
What about probiotics? I feel like those are everywhere these days.
Yeah, they are probiotics, those live microorganisms that we consume to introduce beneficial strains into the gut have
Yeah.
become really popular.
But there are so many different types. How do you know which ones are actually worth taking?
That's a great question. It's important to remember that not all probiotics are created equal.
Okay.
Their effectiveness really depends on the specific strain of bacteria and what condition you're trying to target.
So one probiotic might work for one thing but not another.
Exactly. For example, some strains of lactobacillus have been shown to help reduce symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, while others might be better at supporting immune function.
So it's really important to do your research and choose probiotics that have been specifically studied for the condition you're dealing with. Exactly, and it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor or a healthcare professional before starting any new probiotic regimen.
Right, right. So besides prebiotics and probiotics, are there other dietary strategies being explored to modulate the microbiome?
Researchers are also looking into what they call microbiota-directed complementary foods.
Okay.
These are foods specifically designed to promote the growth of beneficial bacteria,
Well, interesting.
and they're being explored as a way to combat childhood undernutrition.
Makes sense, since a healthy gut microbiome is so important for growth and development.
Exactly. The idea is that by providing these foods early on, we can help shape a healthy gut microbiome from the start.
It's amazing how important those early interventions can be for long-term health.
Absolutely. The early years are a critical time for shaping the gut microbiota.
The essay also talked about the potential for microbiome-based therapies to address mental health conditions like depression. That seems like a really promising area of research.
It is. There's this growing understanding of the gut-brain axis, which is this two-way communication network between the gut and the brain.
Right.
And emerging research suggests that imbalances in the gut microbiome can actually contribute to mood disorders like depression.
So it's not just about butterflies in your stomach.
Yeah.
Our gut bacteria can actually influence our mental state.
Exactly. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. And there are a few different strategies being explored to try to modulate the microbiome and potentially help alleviate symptoms of depression.
Like what?
One approach is to increase the intake of prebiotic fibers.
So those can impact mental health too.
Prebiotics promote the growth of those beneficial bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs,
Right.
and those SCFAs have been linked to mood-boosting effects.
Wow, it really is true that what we eat can have a big impact on how we feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another strategy is to use specific probiotic strains that have been shown to have positive effects on mood.
So some probiotics could act like natural antidepressants.
Well, some studies have shown that certain strains of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium have antidepressant-like effects in preclinical studies.
Interesting.
But more research is definitely needed in humans.
Makes sense. Are there any other approaches being investigated?
Researchers are also exploring the use of postbiotic supplements, things like SCFAs themselves, to directly impact brain function and mood.
So instead of introducing the bacteria, you just deliver the beneficial compounds they make.
Exactly. And that might be a more targeted and predictable way to get results.
It's incredible to think that the key to improving mental health could actually be in our gut.
And now it's fascinating.
Sure.
What are some of the challenges with developing microbiome-based therapies for mental health conditions, though?
Yeah, I imagine there are a few.
One of the biggest challenges is just the sheer complexity of the gut-brain axis.
Right.
It's not just one simple thing. It involves multiple signaling pathways, interactions between the gut microbiota, the immune system, the endocrine system, the nervous system.
So it's a whole network of factors that contribute to mental health.
Exactly. And another challenge is that mental health disorders themselves are so diverse.
Right. Depression can look different in different people and have different causes.
You got it. So Developing standardized treatments that will work for everyone is going to be really tough.
I imagine a personalized approach will be important here, just like with other microbiome-based therapies.
Absolutely. Now, what about ethical considerations?
Sure.
Are there any specific challenges with manipulating the microbiome to address mental health?
That's a good question.
Well, the ethical considerations for microbiome-based therapies for mental health are pretty much the same as those for other medical interventions.
Makes sense.
It's all about making sure that these therapies are safe and effective, and that patients understand the potential risks and benefits before they agree to treatment.
Right. Informed consent is key.
Exactly. And then there's the question of long-term implications.
What do you mean?
Well, the microbiome is such a complex and dynamic system, and we're still learning so much about it.
Right.
Altering it, whether through diet FMT or other interventions, could have cascading effects that we may not fully understand for years to come.
So we need to be careful and do a lot more research to understand the short-term and long-term consequences of these interventions.
Absolutely. We need to make sure we're developing safe and sustainable therapies that promote long-term health and well-being, not just quick fixes that could cause problems down the road.
Right, right. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the role of the microbiome in immune function.
Okay.
That's another really interesting area.
It is. The microbiome plays a huge role in shaping and regulating our immune system. From the very beginning when we're born, our gut microbes start interacting with our immune cells.
Oh, wow.
And they actually help train our immune system to distinguish between harmful pathogens and harmless substances.
So our gut microbes are like teachers for our immune system.
That's a great way to put it. This early education is so important for developing a robust and balanced immune system that can protect us from infections and prevent autoimmune disorders.
So what happens when that microbial education doesn't go as planned?
Well, when the gut microbiota gets disrupted, like if someone takes a lot of antibiotics or has a poor diet or is exposed to certain environmental factors,
Right.
it can lead to immune dysregulation. And that can show up in different ways, like increased susceptibility to infections, allergies, or even autoimmune diseases.
So a healthy and balanced microbiome is essential for a strong and well-functioning immune system.
Exactly. And now researchers are exploring how to actually modulate the microbiome to boost immune function and even prevent or treat immune-related disorders.
How are they doing that?
Well, one approach is to use probiotics to introduce those beneficial bacteria that can help restore balance to the gut microbiota.
So probiotics could be like a little boost for the immune system?
Yeah, exactly. Some probiotic strains have been shown to enhance immune responses, reduce inflammation, and even make vaccines more effective.
Wow, so probiotics could be a valuable complementary therapy to improve overall health.
They could be. What about prebiotics?
Can they play a role in modulating the immune system too?
Absolutely. They might not directly impact immune cells,
Okay.
but they can indirectly influence immune function by promoting the growth of those good bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
Oh, right. We talked about those.
Yeah, and SCFAs have been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects and to modulate immune cell activity.
So eating those prebiotic-rich foods can actually have a ripple effect throughout the body.
Exactly. It's all connected. What about more targeted approaches, though?
Yeah. Are there any therapies specifically designed to manipulate the microbiome for immune-related disorders?
Scientists are developing what they call microbial consortia, which are specifically designed to restore or enhance specific immune functions.
So it's like creating a specialized team of bacteria to address a specific immune problem.
Exactly. And researchers are investigating their potential to treat a wide range of conditions, things like allergies, autoimmune diseases, and even cancer.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Uh-huh.
How are they using them to target cancer?
Well, scientists are exploring how to use microbial consortia to make cancer immunotherapy more effective.
Right, because immunotherapy uses the body's own immune system to fight cancer cells.
You got it. But it doesn't always work as well as we'd like.
Okay.
So the idea is that you could use these microbial consortia to kind of prime the immune system, make it more responsive to those immunotherapy treatments.
As the bacteria are like cheerleaders for the immune system.
Exactly. And preclinical studies have actually shown that some microbial consortia can really enhance the efficacy of cancer immunotherapy.
Leading to better tumor control and survival rates?
Exactly. It's very promising.
That's incredible. It's
Yeah.
like using the microbiome to boost the power of existing treatments.
It is. What are the challenges with developing these microbial consortia for immune modulation, though?
Yeah, what are the roadblocks there?
The challenges are pretty similar to the ones we discussed earlier, understanding those complex interactions between bacterial strains, making sure they're stable and can survive, and of course navigating the regulatory landscape.
Right, right. but it sounds like the potential benefits make it worth pursuing.
Oh, definitely. Now let's talk about another fascinating connection, the link between the microbiome and metabolic health.
Okay.
The gut microbiota is really important in regulating our metabolism. It affects everything from how we break down food and absorb nutrients to how we store and use energy.
So our gut bacteria are influencing our body's energy balance.
Exactly. They're involved in all sorts of metabolic processes like breaking down complex carbohydrates, synthesizing vitamins, regulating bile acid metabolism.
Wow, so those processes directly impact our ability to get energy from food and regulate blood sugar.
You got it. And that's why when there are disruptions in the gut microbiota, it can contribute to metabolic disorders like obesity and type 2 diabetes.
So an unhealthy microbiome could make it harder to maintain a healthy weight and manage blood sugar levels.
Exactly. Studies have shown that people with obesity and type 2 diabetes often have different gut microbiota compositions than healthy individuals.
So it's not just about calories in versus calories out. The types of bacteria in our gut actually influence how our bodies process and use energy.
Exactly. And that's why there's so much interest in using microbiome modulation strategies to try to prevent or treat these metabolic disorders.
What are some of those strategies?
One approach is to use prebiotics to encourage the growth of those good bacteria that can help improve glucose metabolism and reduce inflammation.
So again, those dietary interventions we talked about can have a ripple effect on different aspects of health.
You got it. Another strategy is to use specific probiotic strains that have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce body weight, or lower blood sugar levels.
It seems like probiotics are being studied for so many different conditions.
They are, and there's growing evidence that they can be really effective. But as we've said, not all probiotics are created equal, and more research is needed to figure out the best strains and dosages for each specific condition.
Right, that makes sense. What about FMT?
Oh, yeah.
Could that be used to address metabolic disorders too?
Researchers are definitely looking into that, the potential of FMT to treat obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Oh, wow.
It's still pretty early, but there have been some promising results.
Like what?
Some small studies have shown that when you transfer gut bacteria from lean donors to people with obesity or metabolic syndrome, it can actually improve insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism.
So it's like resetting the metabolic balance.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But we need more research to confirm these findings and see what the long-term effects are.
Makes sense. What about more targeted therapies?
Well, one exciting area of research is the development of postbiotic therapies that deliver those beneficial compounds that are produced by gut bacteria.
Oh?
For example, researchers are looking into delivering short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, directly to the gut to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation.
So instead of introducing the bacteria themselves, we just give the body the good stuff they make.
Precisely. And this approach has some potential advantages too. It allows for more precise dosing, and it might be safer than introducing live bacteria, especially for people with compromised immune systems.
That's really interesting. So it's clear that the microbiome plays a huge role in regulating our metabolism, and that there's a lot of potential for using microbiome modulation to address these metabolic disorders.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about another area where the microbiome seems to be involved, the aging process.
Okay.
As we age, composition and function of our gut microbiota change.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and these changes can contribute to some of the things we associate with getting older, like decline in immune function, increased inflammation, even cognitive impairment.
So the aging process affects our gut bacteria, and then those changes in our gut bacteria can further contribute to age-related decline.
Exactly. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, but researchers are now exploring ways to try to modulate the microbiome to promote healthy aging and maybe even extend lifespan.
Wow, so could manipulating the microbiome actually help us age better?
Well, that's the hope. What are some of the strategies they're looking at?
Yeah, what are they trying?
One approach is to use dietary interventions like increasing prebiotic or probiotic intake to try to boost the growth of those beneficial bacteria that tend to decline as we get older.
So maintaining a healthy and diverse gut microbiota throughout life is important for healthy aging.
Exactly. Another strategy they're looking at is using FMT to transfer gut bacteria from a younger donor to an older recipient.
It's like a microbial fountain of youth.
You could say that. It's still a very new area of research, but some animal studies have shown that FMT can actually improve cognitive function and reduce inflammation in older animals.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like turning back the clock on aging, at least in the gut.
Well, that's the idea, but more research is definitely needed to see if it works the same way in humans.
What about more targeted approaches?
Researchers are also developing microbial consortia that are specifically designed to restore or enhance those functions that tend to decline with age, things like immune function or cognitive function.
So it's like creating a customized blend of bacteria to help people age gracefully.
Exactly. And as we learn more about the aging process and the role of the microbiome, we can expect to see even more innovative therapies emerge in this area.
It's an exciting field for sure. It seems like the microbiome really does hold the key to a lot of aspects of health and well-being.
It does. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to touch on something that often gets overlooked, the role of the microbiome beyond the gut.
Right, we've been focusing on the gut microbiome, but there are microbes all over our body, right?
Exactly. There are microbial communities on our skin and our mouths and our respiratory tract, even.
So we're covered in microbes inside and out.
We are. And while those other microbiomes may not be as diverse as the gut microbiome, they still play really important roles in our health.
So what are some examples of how these other microbiomes impact us?
Well, the skin microbiome, for example, helps to protect us from harmful pathogens and regulate skin inflammation.
Okay.
Disruptions in the skin microbiome have been linked to things like acne, eczema, and even skin cancer. The oral microbiome is super important for maintaining oral health, preventing cavities and gum disease.
Makes sense.
But imbalances in the oral microbiome have also been linked to systemic diseases like heart disease and stroke.
Really? So our oral health can actually affect our overall health.
It can, and then there's the respiratory microbiome, which helps protect our lungs from infection and regulate immune responses in the airways.
Okay.
Alterations in the respiratory microbiome have been implicated in conditions like asthma, COPD, and even respiratory infections.
It's amazing to think about all these different microbial communities working behind the scenes to keep us healthy.
It is. As we learn more about these other microbiomes, we can expect to see more therapies that specifically target them.
That's exciting. It seems like the microbiome is involved in almost every aspect of health and well-being.
It really is, and as research in this field continues to advance, we're going to see a whole new wave of therapies emerge that will change the way we approach health and disease.
It's definitely a field to watch. So we've talked a lot about the science, but let's get practical. How are scientists actually using this knowledge to develop real-world therapies?
One of the most exciting examples is the use of fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT, to treat recurrent Clostridioides difficile infection.
Right, that's the infection that's really hard to treat with antibiotics.
Yeah, and FMT has been incredibly successful with a 90% success rate, as the review article mentioned.
That's amazing. It's like a whole new approach to treating a really tough condition.
It is. What's interesting is that C. difficile infection often develops after someone takes antibiotics.
Right.
And those antibiotics disrupt the normal balance of the gut microbiota.
So like the antibiotics create an opening for C, can difficile to take hold.
Exactly. And then it can cause all those severe symptoms like diarrhea and inflammation.
So how does FMT actually work to treat it?
Well, FMT basically reintroduces a healthy and diverse community of microbes from a donor's fecal sample. And that helps restore what we call colonization resistance, which is the ability of the gut microbiota to prevent harmful pathogens from growing.
So it's like replenishing the gut with good bacteria to fight off the bad ones.
Exactly. It's like rebuilding a healthy ecosystem.
And it's not just an experimental treatment anymore, right?
Nope, it's becoming much more mainstream. Several companies are developing standardized FMT products.
So it's becoming safer and more accessible.
Exactly.
That's great to hear. Are scientists working on ways to refine the FMT procedure even further?
Definitely one promising approach is to use what we call fractionated or partially defined communities.
What does that mean?
Basically, instead of using the whole fecal sample, they select specific beneficial bacteria from the donor.
Oh, so they're creating a more targeted treatment.
Exactly. It reduces the variability that you get with using the whole fecal transplant, and it might lower the risk of transmitting any unwanted microbes.
It's like they're creating a custom blend of good bacteria.
That's a good way to put it.
What about other conditions besides C? Difficile infection. Is FMT being explored for those?
Researchers are looking into its potential for inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, metabolic disorders, even neurological conditions.
No, it's a pretty wide range.
The research is still early for many of these conditions, but the initial findings are pretty encouraging.
So FMT could have a lot more applications than we initially thought.
It could.
What about less invasive ways to manipulate the microbiome? We talked about dietary strategies earlier. How are those being used?
Dietary interventions are becoming increasingly popular as a way to promote a healthy gut microbiota.
Because what we eat can directly impact the composition of our gut microbiome, right?
Absolutely. One strategy that's showing a lot of promise is to just increase your intake of prebiotics.
Those are the indigestible fibers that feed the good bacteria.
Exactly, and eating plenty of prebiotic-rich foods like onions, garlic, bananas, legumes, whole grains can really help those beneficial bacteria flourish.
So it's not just about what we eat, but what we feed our gut microbes.
You got it. Are there more targeted dietary approaches, though?
Yeah. What else are they working on?
Well, researchers are also developing what they call microbiota-directed complementary foods.
Okay, what are those?
These foods are specifically designed to promote the growth of those beneficial bacteria, and they're being explored as a way to combat childhood undernutrition.
That makes sense, since a healthy gut microbiome is so important for growth and development.
Exactly. The idea is that by giving these foods early on, we can help establish a healthy gut microbiome from the start.
It's amazing how these early interventions can have such a big impact on long-term health.
They really can. Those early years are so critical for shaping the gut microbiota.
Now, what about probiotics? I know those have become really popular in recent years.
They have, and for good reason. Probiotics, those live microorganisms that we consume to introduce beneficial bacteria into the gut, are a pretty direct way to supplement the gut with those good bacteria.
But there are so many different probiotic products out there. How do you know which ones are actually effective?
That's a great question, and it's important to remember that not all probiotics are created equal. The effectiveness of a probiotic really depends on the specific strain of bacteria and what it's being used for.
So you have to do your research.
You do. Some strains of lactobacillus, for example, have been shown to be helpful for irritable bowel syndrome, while others might be better for boosting immune function.
So you need to be specific about what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly, and it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor before starting any new probiotic regimen.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So are there other areas of research in microbiome-based therapies that are showing promise?
Definitely one area that's really exciting is the development of postbiotic therapies.
Postbiotic therapies, what are those?
Well, instead of introducing live bacteria, postbiotic therapies involve delivering the beneficial compounds that are produced by those gut bacteria.
So it's like giving the body the good stuff directly.
Exactly. And there are some advantages to this approach.
Like,
Well, for one thing, postbiotics are more stable than live probiotics, so they're easier to store and transport. And they're also less likely to cause problems for people with weakened immune systems.
that makes sense.
And another advantage is that you can control the dosage more precisely with postbiotics.
So it's a more targeted approach.
Exactly. And as we learn more about the specific functions of different postbiotics, we can expect to see even more targeted therapies being developed.
It's amazing to think about all the different ways that scientists are manipulating the microbiome to improve health.
It is, and we've really only just scratched the surface.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways you hope people will remember about this field?
Well, the biggest takeaway is that the microbiome is absolutely essential for human health. It's a complex and dynamic ecosystem that influences so many aspects of our well-being.
And we're only just beginning to understand all the ways that it impacts us.
That's right. But the potential for developing new and effective therapies based on what we're learning is huge.
It's a whole new frontier of medicine.
It is, and whether it's FMT, dietary interventions, postbiotics, or any of the other approaches we've talked about, the field of microbiome-based therapeutics is rapidly advancing and offering new hope for so many different health challenges.
It's definitely an exciting time to be following this research.
It is.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of the microbiome. I've learned so much, and I hope our listeners have too.
Me too.
It's incredible to think about these trillions of tiny organisms living inside us and how much they impact our health.
No, it's amazing.
And as scientists continue to explore this fascinating frontier, we can expect even more groundbreaking discoveries and innovative therapies to emerge.
Absolutely.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the human body. That's all for this deep dive. Until next time.